Hey everybody, Jochen Hayden here, and I'm back with part 2 of 3 of my pilot management tutorial series. So on this video, I'm going to show you guys how to actually move pilots around, put them in squadrons, take them out, and I will show you some tips and tricks on how to pick the best pilots and show you different methods to get them into your squadrons and maybe a few other things too. So because for this to work, I'm going to have to start and stop the video multiple times because I need to basically do an action and run the turn so you can see what happens the following turn. So you may see this video cut in and out a lot. You may hear the music playing one song and the next it's playing a different song. There's nothing I can do about that. I want to give you some background music, but I do need to run turns and I'm not going to make you sit through the turn run. So expect a lot of transitions and changes as I go through different things. So the first thing I want to do is talk about how to put pilots into your squadron. So we're going to go over to Tokyo, and I'm going to use the Hosho 2. It's a Kate unit, right? So currently it has 40 pilots in there, but let's say it has 0 pilots. I'm going to show you how to get pilots in there. So what I'm going to do first, and this is not part of the lesson, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to get all these pilots out of here, okay? So let's start with a clean slate. This unit has 30 aircraft assigned to it and 0 pilots assigned. So I'm going to show you a couple ways how to get pilots in there. So a few videos ago when I did my aircraft and squadron interface video, I talked about manual and automatic pilot selection option. So there's 2 ways of getting pilots into your squadron. You can do it manually or you can have the game do it for you. Personally, I prefer using manual, and I'm going to show you why. But let's say you just want to automate everything. Well, you can do that. So to do that, what you need to do is to have the game automatically keep your squadrons topped off with pilots so you don't have to do it yourself. You select automatic. And then over here, in over on this section here, it's going to show you different levels of experience that your pilots can have, right? So if you select trained 50 plus, it will grab pilots from anywhere from 50 and down. So the plus is a little misleading because it won't go more than 50, it won't go past 50 is what that's telling you. When it's in yellow, it's telling you that your pilot pools don't have a full quantity of pilots that are at this training level to meet this demand, right? It has some but not all. When you see red, that means it has none. So that means we have 0 pilots that have a training level of 90 or more. So what we're going to do here is we're going to select, let's say we're going to select 50, okay? I'm going to show you what happens when you do this. For this to work, you do have to ensure one thing, though. You have to make sure that the squadron has an actual mission. Right now, this squadron is stood down, so it has a training level of 0. It's on training, so this squadron is basically inactive. It's not doing anything. As long as it's in this configuration, the game will not assign pilots to it. So you need to give it a job. So let's say we're going to assign this for a naval attack, okay? Now it has a mission. It has 100% of its pilots dedicated to training for naval attack. If it was like this, they're not doing anything, and the game won't put pilots in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that to give this squadron a job. In this case, it's going to be training. We have it set to 50, and again, right now it's telling us that the game that your pilot pools don't have enough pilots to make this request. But let's see what happens anyway. So I'm going to run this, and I'll let you see what happens the next turn when we have the game automatically fill out our pilot roster for this squadron. Okay, so just sit tight. I'll be right back. I'm going to run this turn and we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm back. So we'll take a look at Hosho 2. This is the next turn. And as you can see, it has filled out our squadron with 30 pilots. So we're allowed to have 30 pilots. It gave us 30 pilots. You can actually exceed your pilot count by 1/3. So every squadron can have more than its full quantity of aircraft by 1/3. So we could put another 10 pilots in here if we wanted to, but we're not going to do that right now. But let's see what we got. So the game did its best to fill out the pilots with what we had available. So it gave us quite a bit of pilots around 50 skill. and some a little bit lower because all it had to draw from. It did exceed 50 a little bit, so maybe I misspoke with the plus sign. I guess it is plus, but it's not by much. It didn't go anywhere near 60, for example, right? But there you go. So it did what we asked it to do. That's pretty cool, right? But let me show you what happens if you select a skill level that that isn't green. Okay. So right now it's saying we have pilots all the way up to 70 skill, but not enough for 80. What happens if we run it at 80? Let me show you what happens, and I'll give you another reason why I don't like automatic pilot selection. So let's say we do this here, okay? So I'm going to clear these pilots back out. Also, one thing you notice, it did attempt to put naval torpedo aircraft pilots in here. So it was trying to match them up. Anyway, we're back to 0 pilots. I'm going to run the turn again, but this time I've selected veteran 80 plus, and let's see what we get out of that. Okay? I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back again. So the turn has run again, and now we have 30 pilots back in here. Let's see what it gave us. Okay? Aha. Do you see this? It gave us nothing near what we asked for, okay? So this is why I am cautious about using the automatic pilot selection. It works sometimes, but if you click this button wrong, you could end up with a flock of seagulls like this, where it came nowhere close to coming anywhere near 80 skill, or let me rephrase, 80 experience level, not skill level. It did not come anywhere near 80 experience level. If I've been misspeaking, let me correct this now. This is the total experience of the pilot, not its individual skills. Because as you look here, your pilots have different skills, but the overall number here is experience level, right? And this is different from the skills. So this filter up here is for the experience level, and it will attempt to find pilots that are trained in the skill that the aircraft does. So you see these green numbers. These are pilots that have been training for naval torpedo skill. So it did try to find this naval torpedo trained pilots, but it did not come close to doing the skill. So these are the risks you take when you use automatic pilot selection. If you're very careful and you keep selecting stuff that's green, you should be getting that. If you go into yellow, you're in uncharted territory, and it may give you something that you don't want. The reason that the first time I ran this, it was yellow and not green when I had it at 50 was because I had just transferred all those pilots out that turn, and they hadn't quite made it to the reserve pool yet. All the subsequent times you see now, these trained pilots are now at 50 plus, and there's more. Anyway, that's automatic pilot selection. Let me show you now manual pilot selection. This is the method that I personally use, and I think it's more reliable. And while it does increase the micromanaging you have to do, I feel like you get better control over what you're getting. So we're going to set this back to manual. All right, so when that's grayed out, it means it does nothing. So now we're back in manual, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer all these pilots back out and show you ways to get pilots back into your squadron. So you can do several different methods. You can do pilots straight from the replacement pool, and in which case you have no control over what you're getting because they're in a replacement pool and you can't see them. All you know is that their average experience is going to be 35. That's what this number in parentheses mean. This means this is the average experience level of the pilots in the selected pool. The reserve has an average pilot experience level of 55. TRACOM has an average experience level of 81. Any is any. You could get you can get a random assortment of pilots from any of the available pools. So let's say we just want to make this down and dirty real quick. We don't care what we get. We just want to throw pilots into the squadron to fill it up so they can start training. In which case, what I would do then, I would select the replacement pool because I don't care about what the quality of these pilots are. And I'll use this button over here that says Get 30 Pilots. So I'll click that. And now it instantly drops 30 pilots from the replacement pool into our ready pilots. So let's click on that, and we're going to see what we get. Sorting by experience, we get a decent assortment of stuff. We got anywhere from 40 down to 27. But if you were to take these numbers and average them all out, the average experience would be really close to 35, right? It's not quite. One thing to remember is this is an average experience. It doesn't mean that you're going to get exactly 35 every time. It could be plus or minus a little bit, but it's really close, right? So this is what we ended up with. An average experience from those 30 pilots from the replacement pool is this. And as you can see, looking at the top skills here, it did its very best to try to find pilots that were closest in individual skill level to the type of aircraft that they're flying. So you notice here, the air skill is low, the recon skill is low, transportation skill is low, because all of these pilots that are training in the pool have different specializations that we can't see. It's abstracted off the screen. But there are pilots that have better naval torpedo skill than others. There's others that are better fighter pilots than others. So when you use this button, the game will attempt to find the best pilots to suit your needs based on what you requested. So we got pilots of approximately 35 experience level, and we got pilots that are pretty decent at torpedo bombing, considering that they're new. All right. So that is a quick and easy method to get pilots into your squadron. And if you, assuming you don't care exactly what it is that you get. So at this point, we can go up to 40 if we needed to. That's why it says 10. And the reason we can go to 40 is you can get the max complement of the assigned aircraft plus 1/3. Why would you want to do that? In case you want a little bit of extra pilots available, or if you want to try to cram every available pilot into a squadron to train what you can. There are penalties for doing that, and I'll explain that in the third part of my series here. But there you go. So let's say we don't want to put 10 more pilots in, but we want to put maybe 33 for whatever reason. This button here does individual pilots one at a time from whatever pool you select. So let's say we want to make this 33. We can click this button 1, 2, 3 times. Okay. So this does them in bulk, and this does them one at a time. So if we look here, we got another 3 pilots, and it's going to be kind of hard to tell because we didn't write down what we got. But now we have 33 pilots, and they have 0 delay, and they're ready to go. Okay. So that's how you just do the bulk transfer. Now I'm going to show you how to grab specialized pilots that you have a little more control over. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and dump all these pilots back into the reserve. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to do a special veteran selection. So what you're going to want to do here is select this from reserve, right? And then you're going to click this request veteran button. So this is going to show you your reserve pool for the nation that you're playing. In this case, it's the Imperial Japanese Navy. It's still Japanese, but the Army and the Navy are called different nations or whatever, just for the sake of separating, because they do totally different missions. So in this case here, we're drawing from the reserve pool, and you notice that all of our pilots are available, but I only want a certain type of pilot, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click all and make these turn yellow. Yellow means they're not selected. And then I'm going to click bomber. All right. This is only going to give me bomber type pilots. And why is this important? There's 2 reasons. One, these pilots will tend to have better specialization in the type of aircraft that we're doing, in which case this is a torpedo bomber. And 2, there are penalties for grabbing the wrong type of pilots and putting them into aircraft that they're not assigned to. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But let me show you one of 2 ways to get pilots into your squadrons using this method. Okay. So the first option, which is what I recommend, is doing it in bulk with the buttons at the bottom. So if you look at the bottom, right now it says most experienced because we've selected this. Watch what happens down here when I click on the different skill levels, right? It changes over here, most to least skilled. All right. So in this case, we have a torpedo bomber squadron, and I want torpedo bomber pilots. All right. So I'm going to click on nav T, and if you highlight over these skills, it will put it up above it. It says naval torpedo skill. Okay, so now this is sorting from the pilots that have the most naval torpedo skill to the least. And now we can use these buttons here to move either 1, 5, or up to 10 pilots at a time. And it will sort by this naval torpedo. So let's say we want to do it this way. I want to use the most skilled naval torpedo pilots I've got. So I'm going to click this button, release 10 pilots. And I'm going to hit it 3 times because I want 30 pilots. See, 30 pilots are needed. This will go up to the maximum needed pilots. So watch, we're going to hit it this way. 1, 2, 3. All right. So now when we go back, you notice this number changed to 30 in parentheses. We now have 30 pilots with high naval torpedo skill, and they have a 1-day delay. If you want to expedite this, what you can do is you can go over here and right-click with your mouse, and it says transfer to active status, and you can click the Y key on your keyboard to make it go yes, or click yes. And now that delay turns to 0. Does it matter if you do this or not? Not really, because nothing will happen to these pilots until the next turn. So if it has delay 1, these will all be in play by the next turn when we come back. So it's not necessarily critical unless you're OCD like me. I like these pilots to have no delay. I like to see no parentheses whenever possible. So I go down this list and manually click it. Again, there's no proof that doing this helps one bit to me. This may just be a silly little thing to do, but I do it. So it's up to you if you want to do that or not. I'm not convinced that it has any benefit. But anyway, using that method, we transferred 30 pilots in, and we did it in bulk, and we were able to select pilots with the best skills and move them right away. And you notice that we get them more or less instantly. They come with 1 delay, which we can easily turn into 0. And that's fine if we want to transfer in bulk and we don't want to name select pilots. But let's say we wanted to name select pilots. Let me show you what happens when you do that. So I'm going to send all these pilots back to the pool. And now I'm going to show you what happens when you name select pilots and don't do the bulk transfer method that I showed you. So we're going to go back to our reserve. We're going to click request veteran. And what I'm going to do again is I'm going to click all and bomber because I'm only worried about bomber pilots. And I will click nav T. And again, I'm sorting from best pilots to worst for this particular skill. Let's say I want to go down this list and there's one pilot in particular that I really got to have, right? I don't want all 30, but I want just 1 or 2 of them. Look what happens when you name select pilots. You left click on the name and it asks you if you want to assign that pilot to host show 2. I'm going to click yes. Look what happened here. Do you see this? His due date, and this is the delay, is now 5 days. So this pilot will not show up in that squadron for 5 days. Let's do a few more. Watch what happens when you do this. Select pilot, yes. We have 2. Select 4. Select, select, select. You guys get the idea, right? What happens here when you manually name select an individual pilot on his own, it will give it a random delay from 0 to 4, up to a 2-week delay. Typically, I never really see it go past 6 or 7, but it can. But it's a random delay, and you have no control over how it's going to work out. So let's keep going. Okay, so this guy here has a 12-day delay. Oh, you know why? I transferred him back and forth. Never mind that. That was a misclick. Let's keep going down the list. Let's see what kind of delays we get. Are you seeing this? Okay, so this guy here, check it out. O'Hara T actually got a random 1-day delay. So that means we can actually use him pretty quickly. But you see what I'm saying? When you manually name select pilots in this method, you get this delay and there's no control over it. You may get a 1-day delay, you may get a 5 or a whatever day delay. But be that as it may, almost none of these pilots will be available to you until that due date comes up. So why would you do that? Well, if you really got to have a certain type of pilot, you would do that. If you want to circumvent this delay, you would use this method down here where you just sort by the skill level and you release the pilots. You can either go from the bottom up or from the top down. But any delays that they have will be inherited. So for example, these 10 pilots, let's say I want to transfer them all back to the reserve. Let's watch what happens when I do that. I know this is kind of tedious. I'm sorry. When I transfer them back to the, let's say I say, oh, I'm just kidding, I don't want them. They're stuck with that delay, and there's nothing you can do about it. So let's say we screwed up and we name selected these guys, but we had second thoughts, but we still want to use this method down here. Watch what happens when I click release 10 pilots now. It's going to grab 10 pilots, but look what happens when we go back over to the pilot list. We just got a bunch of pilots that are not active yet because they're in transit. Do you see that? And those delays that they had stay. So that's why I don't typically like to do name selecting of pilots, because you get random delay counts that you can't control and they won't be available right away. I always prefer to use this button down here and release pilots in bulk because it skips that due delay. Is this an exploit? I don't know. Is this working as intended? I have no idea. I don't know why one method is instant and the other is not. The only thing I can suggest is that maybe because you have more control over name selecting your pilots, they want to give you a penalty for doing that, whereas selecting them in bulk, you may not get the pilots you want exactly, so they waive the delay. Again, working as intended or an exploit, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to decide. But yeah, that's one way that you can get pilots to your squadrons quickly and not have any delay and be able to use them right away. All right. But there's more. Doing name select has other penalties too. And that happens when you grab a pilot from the wrong type of aircraft and put them into a new type of aircraft. If you do it by the name select method, you will incur a penalty. So let's do some testing. Wait right here while I queue it up. Okay guys, I'm back with Hosho 2, and now I'm going to show you what happens if you try to grab the wrong pilot type and put him into a different aircraft type unit. So what I'm saying, for example, is grabbing a fighter pilot and trying to put him into a torpedo bomber pilot, or trying to take a dive bomber pilot and putting him into a fighter pilot unit. You get the idea. There's a penalty, but only if you use the name select option. So let's get into it. So right now this unit has no pilots in it, so I'm going to go to my reserve and click request veteran, and you'll notice here that I only have 10 pilots in my reserve now, and they're all fighter pilots. I grabbed all 10 of these fighter pilots from a A5M Claude unit, so that is a fighter type unit, and I'm trying to put them into a torpedo bomber unit. I want you to see what happens if I decide to name select one of these pilots to put him in. So for example, I'm looking at Goto, and let's say for whatever reason I really want this pilot in my torpedo bomber squadron. I don't know why, whatever your reason may be, and you're saying I want him in here, I want just this one guy. So I'm going to click on his name, and when I do that, I want you to watch what happens to their experience level here. Okay, you ready? Did you see that? It just dropped massively. So he went from a 75 to a 68. That will negatively impact his performance when he flies now. Let's do another one. Kubota. 72. He's at 60 now. He's at 59 here. Let's do Kubota V. Ready? He's at a 59. Now he's at a 58. Are you seeing what happens here? When you name select a pilot that is a different type of pilot than what he's going into, he will take an experience penalty, and it could be anywhere from 0 to whatever. I've seen it go as high as 10. I've seen it be nothing, and I've seen it be 1. You don't know. It's random. So you need to be very careful if you're going to take a different type of pilot and put him into a new type of unit. You will incur a penalty. Let's do a couple more. So Ihara K, right? He's currently 57. I'm going to move him into Hosho 2. 56. How about Chono N? Now let's see, what do we got here? Yeah, let's do Chono N. Ready? He's currently at a 58 experience. 57. All right, so these have been pretty easy on us, but there's no guarantee that it will be that way. So you have to be very careful when you do that. Now, that being said, there is a way to circumvent this. Again, like transferring pilots in bulk circumvents the delay. This method will circumvent the experience drop. Is that an exploit? Is that working as intended? I don't know. My theory is that it's working as intended because the designers of this game, Mr. Grigsby and friends, wanted you to pay a penalty for being able to custom pick your pilots. But when you use these buttons down here, it's a lot harder, right? You don't have as much control over it. You just have to do things in bulk. You can't name select. Personally, I think the penalty for name selecting pilots is too high. The delay is too much, and the experience drop is too much if you want to do something like this. So what I'm going to demonstrate to you now is what happens when you transfer a fighter pilot in bulk to a torpedo bomber unit. I want you to watch the experience levels, okay? So we're going to sort by... Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to clear this out and let these guys do their thing, right? So these guys are sitting, waiting to transfer in. Now, we have our reserve here. We're going to go back to request veteran. And as you can see here, we have 5 pilots, okay? Now, I want you to watch their experience levels here, okay? Watch what happens when I do the release pilot button. Did you see that? Absolutely no change in experience level. Now, if I had more pilots here, we could use release 5, release 10, and do even more. But when you click this button here, while you no longer have control over the name of the pilot specifically, it does the same thing. So you need to ask yourself, what's the better method? Do I want to click each name and send it and then incur a penalty? Or do I want to use these buttons down here and do the same thing, have no delay, and not have any impact on their experience level? I can't tell you if this is an exploit or not. I have my theories, but I need you to be the judge. You guys are playing this game. You need to make the determination if this is okay or not. I'm not going to be the one that tells you that. But I just want you to know that there are penalties for name selecting pilots to your units, and there's not when you use these buttons down here. Okay? You just saw it yourself. No experience drop when I use this button, but when I click on their name specifically, there is a penalty. Why? Again, maybe someone smarter than me who's been playing the game longer can tell you why. I'm just showing you how this works. Okay, keeping with our topic here, there's one thing also I need you to be aware of when you're doing your pilot management. And it has to do with the skills of the pilots. You need to be very careful about what pilots you're transferring over to what type of unit. I'll give you an example. We're back to Hosho 2. I've cleared the pilots back out. And let's say I want to bring in some torpedo-trained pilots. So I'm going to go to Request Veteran. And you'll notice here we have 5 pilots in the bomber reserve, right? With high naval torpedo skill. So I'm like, oh, awesome. These pilots are going to drop right into my my Kate unit, no problem, right? Because these are bomber reserve and they're naval torpedo. Well, let's just start transferring them. Let's say I want to do the name select method. There should be no issue here, right? Because they're torpedo bomber pilots and they're bomber pilots. So let's do one. Let's do Hori N. Watch the experience level. Do you see that it just dropped? Let's do another one. Look at that. They just dropped. Why is that? I'll tell you why. These pilots are from a G4M Betty squadron. What is a G4M Betty? Let's take a look. Let's find a G4M Betty unit and I'll explain what I'm talking about. G4M, right? Medium level bomber. But hey, what gives? These are bomber pilots and they have torpedo skill. Well, yeah, but what kind of bomber pilot? It's a medium level bomber. What is the Kate? A torpedo bomber. Now, this is a unique situation that you have to be careful about. The Betty is both a torpedo and a bomb capable aircraft. So you're going to have pilots that can have high torpedo skill and high bombing skill, but they're flying different types of aircraft. So when you're going around and adding pilots to your squadrons, you need to be cognizant of where they're coming from. Okay? And if you're going to use that name select request veteran option, you're going to take a penalty if they're not torpedo bomber pilots going into a torpedo bomber squadron. Okay? This applies to both the Allies and the Japanese, but because the Japanese have so many more aircraft that can carry torpedoes than the Americans or the Allies do, for example, it's more critical here. You got to be very careful. If you're going to do something like this, I recommend, again, you use the other method for getting the pilots into the squadron. So let me show you again. So, we have a few pilots in our reserve, and they're from that Betty unit. So I'm going to go here to request veteran, and we still have 3 more. Remember, these are all from the Betty unit, so they're not torpedo bomber pilots. They are medium level bomber pilots. But I don't want to use that name select method because it's going to cost me experience. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll sort by naval torpedo, and I'm just going to release the pilots this way. Watch their experience levels in this column as I do it. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. So we just inherited these pilots and did not take a penalty. Again, call it gamey, call it an exploit, or call it working as intended. I don't know. I'm just showing you how this works. But if you're not going to do this, and you're going to name select your pilots, be aware where they're coming from. Write it down. Keep a notepad. Do whatever you have to do to make sure that you put the right pilots with the right aircraft types if you're going to name select them. If you're going to do this down here, don't worry about it. All right, I think I got the point across. That applies to dive bomber pilots going into medium bombers. Your torpedo pilots on the American side going into like a PBY unit, for example. The PBY can carry torpedoes, but it's not a torpedo bomber. It's a float plane, a float patrol plane. So if you name select those pilots, you'll take an experience penalty unless you use the buttons at the bottom. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, so in conclusion, I feel like I've covered all of the topics that I wanted to discuss in this video. But if I missed something that you want to know about, or you have more questions about anything that I discussed, please leave a comment in this video so I can answer your questions. Or you can come to my Discord and ask your questions there, and I'll do my very best to get you an answer for anything I didn't discuss or for something that you want to know more about. So in summary, we discussed manual versus automatic pilot selection. We talked about the different pools and how you move pilots in bulk, randomly, or using the request veteran option. I talked about name selecting versus using these buttons down here to grab pilots that are sorted by whatever skill or experience level you want. We talked about the penalties for name selecting pilots, both in their delay and their experience drops if you're transferring them from an aircraft type that they're not currently assigned to. So, as always, I want to thank you guys for this video. Well, no, I'll thank me for this video. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. And the next video that I'm going to talk about, which will be part 3 of this series, will be pilot training and some ways to go out doing it, how it works, more or less, and some suggestions and strategies for doing it. That's going to be a whole other can of worms because there's a million different ways to train pilots, and everybody thinks they have the best method, and the truth is somewhere in between. I will show you my method, and I will show you some resources and where you can find other people's methods, and you be the judge of what works best for you. But that'll be in the next video. And all I have to say for now is thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys again soon.